All content warning, this video is going to talk about depression and suicide and stuff like that. So if you don't want to hear about that right now, you should watch a different video. I'm going to give you 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. I've been thinking a lot about who I am recently. I hear it's normal when you're unemployed, you suddenly have a lot of time on your hands and you actually run out of distractions surprisingly quickly. I cannot think of a TV show or movie I'd like to be watching right now. Because you don't really need to function anymore, it's a great time to be existential. Hence, I've been thinking a lot about who I am recently. Also, what I want to be doing. Do I even want to be employed again? I know I like to teach and share and explain stuff, but playing the YouTube game is exhausting. Should I stay true to my creative vision and potentially miss out on a larger audience, or should I try and conform to the thing that I know works on the platform? Trying to do both is really hard. But what I want to be doing probably stems from who I am, so I figure I should solve that first. And I don't have the answer, but I have suspicions and memories. My parents didn't have a lot of money, but of the money they had, they chose to allocate a chunk of it to music lessons for their kids. For me, that was the piano. By the time I got an actual teacher, I had already taught myself the piano to some extent, so I had to relearn everything the proper way. And I remember one specific lesson, I must have been like 12, in which I proudly played the piece I had been rehearsing at home, and the teacher shook her head, put her hand on my shoulder, and went, "Amos." It was full panic mode at this point. What did I do wrong? What's happening? Where am I? Who are you? And she said, no, the playing was fine. It's your face. You've got to stop making all the faces. You can't be frowning and scowling and wincing if you're ever going to give a performance in public. And that was 20 years ago, so we didn't have YouTube, but now we do. And I'd like to share with you a clip from my favorite pianist, Evgeny Kissin. This is, to me, the best performance of La Campanella. Evgeny is bringing the piece to life, he is living the piece, and the result is simply breathtaking. And he sure is making a lot of faces, but who gives a shit? He's amazing. And 20 years ago, we didn't have Tumblr either, so I didn't yet have deviation from the norm will be punished unless it's exploitable burned in my brain forever. Thinking back on that piano teacher, I think it marked the start of a journey of learning to cosplay as a human. It was the first time I can remember where an adult noted something I did that didn't really hurt anyone and went, "That's not how you do it." It took a lot more comments over many years for me to fully internalize that whereas others seem to naturally know what you can and can't do, I didn't. I had to observe the world around me and take mental notes and suppress my own instincts, or I would be sure to do a faux pas. And I learned a ton of things. I learned that sometimes there's a thing that is true, but that it's better not to say it. Which still today, as I'm saying it, feels bonkers to me. Why would you not? If it's true, I mean, right? But no. Because my instinct, whenever there was an issue, was to attack it as aggressively as possible, to resolve it as early and as completely as possible so that it's out of the way and we can think about something else. But apparently that's not how everyone works. There's timing involved and feelings getting in the way, and you have to worry about who could hear the conversation and what they're going to think. It's a whole thing. And it doesn't stop there, because so far this is justifiable, right? Like basically have empathy for others and work with them in a way that suits them to smooth things over. I can get behind that. But there's also like politeness and tradition. At the dinner table, you need to have both hands on the table, otherwise someone will ask if you're feeding a dog down there. If you're talking to an adult or a supervisor or someone you don't know very well in French, you use a different pronoun. And you have to ask for permission to perform bodily functions in class. And if you get beat up, you have to shake hands with the dude that beat you up. It's all very confusing. To me. It's very confusing to me. To the others, I was the weird one, not just poorly educated. I was told those things, but on principle, I just didn't want to do it. It didn't make sense to me, so I wasn't going to do it. And looking back, as a depressed 32-year-old, respect. I wish I'd kept that energy. But here comes the exploitable part. I was a smart kid, so I did a bunch of cool stuff. I made good music. I built a bunch of cool Lego stuff, and I got good grades for a long time without really paying attention in class. So much so that in high school, the principal called me to her office and went, "Listen, Amos, you gotta go to class." I'm like, "Why? I have good grades. I'm bored out of my mind, stuck in a classroom all day. I'm not even out on the street doing dope. I'm in the building playing cards with the literary kids. And she goes, I know, the system isn't designed for kids like you. We only really have one speed here, and we're doing our best to make it work for everyone. It gets better after high school, maybe. For now, it's gonna suck. And what do you mean, kids like you? I would, of course, find out soon after university was, in fact, full of kids like me that showed remarkable ability, a slight disregard for social norms, approximative hygiene, undiagnosed mental health issues, and a whole lot of energy, baby. It's time to pull off all-nighters for 3 years in a row and discover alcohol, not tasting the wine at Christmas, but lots and lots and lots of alcohol, rapidly going in and out of your body, landing in the bathroom of whoever's hosting a party in the night in question. It's time to discover sex. It's time to get your heart broken because you need that in a good backstory. And it's time to find out that apparently professors can reuse the same material for 15 years in a row and still have a job. Amazing. And after that, I got a job and another job and another job. And now I don't have a job and I have a minute to think about what the fuck happened. And looking back, the amount of times I was made to feel different in an academic or professional context has gone down. In both cases, I was surrounded by kids somewhat like me, which is suspicious. But even then, even at the Rudolph breeding facility, I still felt different at times. There was the time that I'd heard something someone high up in a company said to a woman, and I was like, that's it. I can't keep working here. I have to find something else. If you can't trust leadership, then what are you doing here? And I talked to colleagues with whom I had a lot in common and they understood where I was coming from, but they didn't necessarily feel the need to rage quit like I did. They weren't happy about it, but they had a house and medications and stuff to pay for, and they needed a job. And I felt like I was 12 again, because it was me and my principles and my values against the world. I understand the rules of the game now. I just don't want to play. I do not care to participate in a world that operates like that. And I thought about a friend I had lost. He told me once, this is the last time I try. And I thought he was talking about business. So I was like, well, I guess you'd get a job if the enterprise doesn't pan out or something. And it only really clicked when he was found a few months later in the river. Before he committed suicide, we had a lot of opportunities to talk about the world. And so when I attended the funeral and listened to the priest, I was boiling. It felt like nobody on the stage really knew who he was. And I did. He was twice my age when he left, but we had connected on a deep level. He also had to learn the rules of the world, and he was deeply upset about it, and eventually chose to stop playing. Putting everything together like that is not a good feeling. I was progressively starting to feel in danger. I was already well versed in suicide when that happened. For some reason, I had been close to several people who had either attempted or successfully committed suicide. And I don't think it's a coincidence. When you get into these extreme situations, it's all down to the wire. There's no decorum, there's no artifice. It's just a raw human experience without the complications of society and appearance and tradition. It was something that made a lot of sense to me. But in all those situations, I was almost always in a caretaker position. I was actively trying to get someone to not end their life and stay with us for a little while longer. Give it a shot. You never know. Sometimes you're pleasantly surprised. If you stick around, you're giving yourself the opportunity to be pleasantly surprised. If things still suck later, you can reevaluate at that point. You're the boss of you. But I would like you to give yourself some time. That was the pitch. It's really hard to help someone in that situation. And I think what helped me was being able to meet them halfway, which is dangerous business. If you're walking halfway to hell, you better save some energy for the trip back. Anyway, a couple years ago, I started going to therapy, which is super late considering, but I was always suspicious of it, of mental health care in general, because I had seen how people who were hospitalized after suicide attempts were treated, for example. And my general line of thinking was, I would rather kill myself. I get the irony of working so hard to send people to a place I would never, ever want to go to, by the way. Internal conflict is delicious. And I knew that in therapy, we would have a lot to unpack. But I was mostly curious about the kids like you bit. You see, I'd been doing a bit of reading, and I was like, very principled, hyper-focusing on very specific abstract ideas, socially awkward, a heightened sense of justice, a tendency to be overstimulated, sensitivity to light, sound, touch. I was suspicious. I asked my mom, hey mom, have I ever been tested? She was like, tested? Yeah, tested. And she was like, no, why would we? You're a normal boy. You're a good boy. Thanks, Mom. That doesn't really, whatever. Sure, okay. And eventually I asked my therapist, I asked, do you think maybe, perhaps, it could be said that I am maybe a little on the spectrum, the autism spectrum? And she went, well, what do you want to know? Bitch, it's me. I want to know myself, and not in the biblical sense. I'm just trying to figure out how I function. And so we kind of left it there, but as the months passed by, I did manage to get out of her a couple, well, one could say you have traits. And recently, quite a few traits, even. But I get her reasoning. She didn't want to give me a diagnostic because for some people it's more like a life sentence. They either define themselves or are defined by others in relation to the label they've been given by the system, and that can be complicated. I was just trying to know where to look, but now I'm also afraid of claiming any labels. I don't want to speak for any community in particular. I'm not even convinced there is one community to speak for. There's still debate on the nomenclature itself. I've been told a bunch of times that I'm not actually autistic. I'm just high potential or gifted, which is not well defined but has a lot of commonalities with the autistic spectrum. And my concern here is it the good kind of gift? Humankind has a thorny relationship with the word special. Is it like special forces or special needs? It's kind of a bummer to be born with a superpower, and year 8, someone comes up to you and is like, what you have is great and different and precious, and you're going to spend the rest of your life learning to turn it off. That would be a great idea for a movie, by the way. I can't believe no one's done it yet. Ignorance is bliss, and thus being clever is a curse, or whatever, is extremely cliche, but it's extremely cliche for a reason. When I think back of my friend that they found in the river, there's a part of me that's worried that that's the logical conclusion, that is how the story has to end at some point. I'm just trying to run out the clock, jumping from special interest to special interest, because when I'm hyper-focusing on something, I'm not as existential. I forget for a minute that with the worldview I've cobbled together over the past 3 decades, there is no way for me to do good. When I'm trying to figure out what I want to do with my life starting now, and depression is hitting really hard, and my analytical skills are fully still operational, and my brain won't stop, and I can't sleep at night, it seems there's very little point in doing anything at all. And this is a very unfortunate combination of circumstances. But I'm trying. For a long time, it felt like I shouldn't share any of this because, well, what are people going to think? What if it hurts my chances of getting another job at some point? But more importantly, what if depression is contagious? What if by sharing this, I've somehow convinced you or comforted you in the idea that life is kind of meaningless? I would feel very, very bad about that. But I'm doing it anyway because I know from experience that people who struggle with depression and suicidal thoughts need to feel understood. It's the one thing that can pull them back. You're never going to save someone by negating their feelings, saying, no, you're wrong. Actually, life is wonderful and your situation definitely doesn't suck. It doesn't work that way. Maybe as you're watching this, you're getting suspicious yourself, thinking, you know what? I have been feeling a bit different at times. Maybe I should look into that. Well, maybe you should. Because there's no direct correlation between being different and wanting to literally end your existence. But there is a direct correlation between not being true to yourself and being deeply, deeply depressed, as any queer person will tell you. Anyway, I've been thinking a lot about who I am, and I don't have the answer yet. But what I know is that I'm not alone, and that means you're not alone either. And so I'm going to follow my own advice and give myself a bit of time and see if anything cool happens. You never know. I hope you do too, and I'll see you around. Take care.